Chef Kuda, welcome to Diaspora Food Stories. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Sheree. I'm doing great. Hope you are too.
Awesome. And you are joining us from Ghana.
Yes, I am. From the
Awesome.
Black
And you're in
Star.
Accra? Okay.
Yes, yes. In the small city of Accra with all the big things that happen in December and every other month.
Well, I'm excited. Ghana is sort of like my second podcast home from the US.
Right,
So much,
right.
so many amazing things out of Ghana. And then chocolate, right? Just the first cacao
Absolutely.
that people do not know just the history of chocolate, but that's for another podcast. But you are Ghana by the way of Zimbabwe.
Yes. Proudly born and raised in Zimbabwe. I spent most of my formative years in Zimbabwe before I actually moved with my whole entire family to the US.
Okay, okay. Oh, okay. So we're definitely going to get into that. So we'll first head on into Zimbabwe before we come to the US
Right,
and then back
right.
to Africa, right? So tell us a little
Sure.
bit about your childhood growing up.
Whew. My childhood was really one that was fun. I was super covered, privileged, spoiled, because I was raised by my grandma.
Uh-oh.
Um,
Big mama, as we like to call, huh?
I know. And so my mom had me at a very young age, and she quickly moved on to go to school and work in England. So I was left with my grandma, and my grandma literally raised me from the time I was 3 till we left for the US.
Okay.
And I must say that I was exposed to a lot of things growing up. And one of the main things was doing household chores, and cooking was one of those household chores that I had to engage in. It was not just a girl job or a girl
Mhm.
chore or the boys go into the garden.
Mhm.
Cooking became one of those that, like, I would come back from school and my grandma would come back from work like 3 4 hours later, and at a certain age she expected me to have um, done some of the cooking. And so that's how I quickly grasped onto cooking. But life in Zimbabwe back then was really, it was really, like, I would say, sheltered for a lot of us.
Mhm.
I grew up in the city, and it was just at the cusp of us gaining independence. So we
Mhm.
still had a lot of that colonial rule influence affecting us.
And that was the
And
British, correct? From the British?
yes, from the British.
Okay.
And so it really affected a lot of how our day-to-day lives were.
Mhm. Wonderful. Now, food-wise, and so, well, let me ask this question first. So it wasn't necessarily a culture where men weren't allowed into the kitchen?
I I think there was a stigma attached to it that mm, cooking was only for the women,
Okay.
and men were supposed to do the physical hard labor kind of chores and
Mhm.
even jobs. So it was not so common to see men cooking.
Okay. But your grandmother went against the grain, so we love her for that, huh?
Oh, oh, my grandma, and even at some point, my mom came back, and it was every Saturday you had to do your bed, sweep your room, do your school uniform laundry, and then come and help her to make breakfast. So that's how my Saturdays were spent. And then later on in the afternoon, you can go and play and do what other kids do. So from a very early age, we did chores. Um, it wasn't a selective activity,
Mhm.
as opposed to some households
Right.
where you would not see the boys, like some of my friends. they did not cook.
Right.
Some of my friends did not clean their rooms. So you would see them either helping change the oil in their dad's cars, or
Mhm.
weeding the garden. And for us, it was more like, okay, this Saturday you will weed the garden. Next Saturday, but did you like? So it was like you did everything basically.
Awesome. And those are just life skills, right? That, you need
Absolutely.
when you grow older to be able to run your household. So most definitely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I'm so grateful for all of those life skills that I got, because I mean I've been in Ghana for 6 years, and
Mm.
not once have I had someone to come and clean my house. I clean my house on my own. And my friends wonder, like, how many times does your cleaner come in? I keep telling them I don't have a cleaner.
Now, if you want one, that's a different story. It's more luxury, but for the most part, you know the products to buy and what you need to do.
Absolutely.
I
That's it.
totally hear you. So let's talk about what were you preparing? Some of the dishes. Let's get into Zimbabwean cuisine and ingredients. I remember in a video that we shared, I saw okra, and
Right.
just your typical produce. So let's talk about that.
Right. So I'm going to be very honest, because I grew up Gen X, millennial, and we grew up in a period where Zimbabwean cuisine was basically shunned upon.
Mm,
Like I said, this is when we still had the influence of the British rule that had just like had passed a couple of years ago, a couple of years passed. And
mhm,
so we grew up at a time where local Zimbabwean food was not, can I call it, trendy, was
okay.
not your common food. And just like everything Zimbabwean, everything cultural to us, we really looked away from it.
Mm,
And even though I had my grandma who would once in a while cook some of her favorite dishes that she grew up eating, my mom loved her okra. She loved her chicken feet. And for me and my age group, I came from an age group that was like, oh no, I can't be eating chicken
mm,
feet. I can't eat okra. I can't
mhm,
eat all this traditional. I want French fries.
mm.
I want
Pizza.
potatoes. I want
Mhm,
fried chicken. And so there was a lot of influence on us, not only from that, but also because at that moment we also had access to a lot of TV that
oh,
previously a lot of the age groups before us didn't have.
mhm.
So pop culture was a huge influence in terms of our food.
Wow. And I look at, when I hear like I'll see a press release or something, and you'll see a Domino's or someone opening in Ghana or this and that. And I'm like,
Right,
no, you know what I mean? Because that
right, right.
westernized diet is just not it. It is not it at
Absolutely.
all. And so, but I totally, totally get it. So, going through, let's talk about your move from Zimbabwe. How old were you when you came to the US?
Okay. I was 19,
Okay. Okay.
and it was right at the time when Zimbabwe was experiencing an economic downturn. And
Okay.
so a lot of people started migrating out of Zimbabwe. Some were heading to South Africa, some were heading to England. And my mom had this opportunity to move to the US, and she asked if it was a great choice. And of course, hey, I'm coming from that heavy pop culture, MTV influenced age group, and I'm thinking I could be seeing myself on 90210
Oh,
or
goodness.
Friday, Don't Be a Menace. And so I was like, yes, please go. And because I really wanted to live the American life over what was happening with us in Zimbabwe, because we actually saw Zimbabwe as a slow, non-progressive country, and we wanted the flashy lights of
Mhm.
America, aka Hollywood.
Right, right. So where in the US did you guys, land? Where did you come to?
Dallas. We were in
Dallas,
Dallas, Texas.
Texas. Hot,
Yes.
hot Dallas.
Yes, the big D.
How was that experience adapting? And one, how was that experience? And two, was America at that time what you thought it was? It's far different from Hollywood. Dallas is very different
Absolutely.
from Hollywood.
Right. So I think what I expected and what I saw were completely different.
Okay.
I think there was some pluses because there was an abundance to whatever it is that you wanted. Lifestyle was definitely different. You
Mhm.
had more choices than you had. But the longer I stayed, probably into my second, third year of college, that's when I started realizing that there was something unique about me.
Mm.
When I look at myself and compare it to everybody, I was not just only Black, I was a Zimbabwean
And then people were
living
like,
in a.
Zimbabwe, where's that at?
Exactly, because Zimbabwe is one of the last. I mean, we're last on the alphabet of countries, but that's one of the last places a lot of people expect to hear anything about when it comes to Africa. It's usually Nigeria,
Mhm,
Ghana, Kenya, and
mhm.
so I found myself being more excited about answering these questions and having to know more about what Zimbabwe is for me, to me, when I am in the US. So even my local language, the one that I didn't want to speak because I wanted to speak the fancy English, I
Uh,
I found pride in it. Our
Now you
food.
still speak it though. Let's clear that up. You have not lost your mother tongue, have you?
Oh no, it is there, like 150%.
I get. Yeah, because
And so
that's just so important.
it really allowed me to to embrace um, my Zimbabwean heritage, my Zimbabwean culture,
Mhm.
and everything that encompasses it in total.
Wonderful. Now, when you were going to school, were you in culinary school or you were just in a regular college studying business
Ah,
study?
the big question. So culinary school only came by years later.
Okay.
I like every African parent, they want us to become doctors, they
Lawyers.
want us
Love
lawyers,
it.
and the idea of also becoming the first doctor in our family was really uh, something that I wanted to push for, and so that was the initial plan.
Mhm.
Um, but along the way, after getting 2 degrees, I was unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And then I met a motivational speaker, life coach, who asked me, "What is it that I'm passionate about?" And I said blindly, I said food. Um, oh no, music. And
Okay.
then he said to me, "No, you're passionate about food." And so I was like, well, not really, because there's nothing I can do with food. Because
Mm,
my background says men cannot work in food, men cannot cook. So it was never something that I would pursue as a career.
mhm.
And so the more I talked to him, by the time I left that meeting with him, I was 100% geared to go to culinary school and get a degree and do whatever I need to do to become a chef. That
Okay.
was now the plan.
So where did he get that impression from? So along the way, as you're going through school, pursuing becoming a doctor, were you cooking along the way and just really having fun with food or something to give him that impression that, that's probably your next path?
I was cooking. I was cooking for my friends in college, for my roommate.
Okay.
We were throwing dinner parties where we didn't know that we were throwing dinner parties. People wanted to come to our house. People wanted to. I swear, people wanted to come to our house to eat. Um, I'm linking up with friends over summer, and everyone is asking me to make my famous coleslaw salad,
Mhm,
and it was just a thing that Kuda loves cooking. I'm
mhm,
going home, and my first night back home, my mom is like, she would call me from work in Dallas, and when I go home in Dallas, and she'll call me from work and say, "Are you home?" And like, yes, and then she'll be like, "Oh, please make me your chicken." And I'm like, okay, I'm sure she just needs a home cooked meal.
mhm.
And but that was the life. But to be honest with you, at that point, I was just going with the flow.
Okay.
I was like, whatever it is that I need to do to live another day, to live another month, a year, I will do it. If it means I have to go to culinary school because that man said I'm passionate about food and I have to do the things that I'm passionate about. So let me just go with it. It
Okay.
had no meaning for me.
Mm, okay. So would you say you were a little reluctant or you're like, you know what, let me explore this more? And then that led you to searching out culinary schools?
I think it had more to do with, I'd like to say it had a lot more to do with immaturity.
Okay.
It's a bit of a personal plot twist to it because I
Okay.
think I had not fully developed. Remember, I had grown up with my grandma who
Mhm.
kept me really sheltered. And so I expected everything to just be handed over to me. Life
Okay.
should be easy. And I wasn't ready yet to make those hard life decisions. But, the funny thing about life is that life just has a weird way of twisting everything around. And so one day it was just like boom in my face. And okay, you know what? If this is the path that you want to go, I will show you. Life said, I will show you this is how life really is. And
Mm,
from that moment, I realized that not only is my passion culinary arts, but my calling,
mhm.
my gifts, like everything about who I am evolves around food. It had
Wow.
nothing to do with anything else.
So when was that light bulb, or as Oprah Winfrey would say, that aha moment? Was it when
Uh-huh.
you were in school or when you were out of school? When was that aha that said, you know what, he was right?
The aha moment came when I was out of school. I was actually in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And at that moment, I was going through it. Life was lifing. I think that's what we say now. Life was
Mhm.
lifing for
Yes,
me.
yes, yes. Look, I'm an older
And
generation, so I guess that's what was being said now.
and I was really hitting rock bottom. In fact, I had hit rock bottom. And that aha moment came when I realized that there was nobody out there for me but me.
Mm,
Nobody else was coming to do it. Nobody was coming to save me. Nobody was coming to give me handouts. And it was just up to me. And I said, God, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm confused. I've studied biology. I've studied political science. I've studied culinary arts. What is it that you want me to do? And God said, use your gifts.
mm,
I've equipped you from the time you were a child. You were making breakfast at age 6. You were cooking for your whole family at 6.
mhm.
And when that moment came, I've I've never experienced an out of body experience like that ever before, because it was like, oh wait, I'm actually supposed to be a chef. I'm actually supposed to be cooking. I'm actually supposed to be pioneering something bigger than just ordinary food on the table. There's a
Mhm.
revolution that needs to happen. We need to put Zimbabwean cuisine out there in the world. We need to talk Zimbabwe, speak Zimbabwe.
Wow.
And that was it for me. And I've
Awesome.
never looked back again.
Awesome. How many years ago was that?
That was 10 to 11 years, 11 years today.
Love it.
11
Wow,
years.
congratulations. And so I'm
Thank you.
sure then, we always sense when we're out of balance, when we're out of alignment, right? It's just whether our spirit don't feel right, we're just not there. But then when we
Right.
come into alignment, right, then there's a peace about it. There's a flow about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So then where does the journey pick up from there? You have this aha moment, you're in food. What are some of those next steps that you really just get that ball rolling?
Right. So I saw cooking for a lot more people other away from my small circle.
Mhm,
I decide that, you know what, it's not going to work just being in Zimbabwe. The level of skill set and what I've studied is not working. So let me head back to the US. Let
mhm,
me get some experience and let me come back. On my way to the US, opportunities in Malaysia opened up, opportunities in the Middle East opened up,
mhm.
and I took them and went for it. And I headed back. See, the thing is, I kept being drawn back to Zimbabwe. So
Gotcha.
after all these stints in these countries, I go back to Zimbabwe and I go and work. I've never worked in a hotel professionally, only
Mhm,
when I was doing my internship.
mhm.
So I get recruited in a hotel in Zimbabwe, one of the first individuals to be recruited through a agency, because normally they do their own recruiting. And I get in there, and I'm technically, experience wise, education wise, I am like the most super qualified person in that establishment, in those kitchens that we had. And they give me the lowest job.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, it's a job.
Mhm,
If I don't take this, I don't have food, I can't pay my bills. So I took that job and I worked in that same position for 2 years.
mhm,
Um, and it allowed me to see what was needed in Zimbabwe, see what was missing, see
mhm.
what I needed to bring to the table, or what my other colleagues needed to bring to the table. And so 2 years from that, I had an opportunity. I was excelling by just doing what I was required to do. And I got headhunted for a head chef role by the owner of the hotel.
Mm,
And so he gave me a head chef role. And then from there, everything just started catapulting. Social media became the in thing.
mhm,
I decided to have my page open, the Black Chef,
mhm.
because I wanted people to really know that as Black people, as Black African people, Black Zimbabweans, we can do this amazing food that we see, this fine dining food that we see.
Right.
And so it made sense for me at that moment to call myself that. And it just blew up. I literally was like celebrity chef in Zimbabwe. Oh, the Black chef. Celebrity chef in Zimbabwe. Like everybody was like the Black chef, the Black chef, the Black chef.
Right.
And I was like, wow, uh, it's beyond me. But I still felt like there was so much more that I needed to do,
Mhm,
because the reach was not just for me in Zimbabwe and my fellow Zimbabweans. The
mhm.
reach was to actually um, take our Zimbabwean food and
Right.
ingredients outside.
Awesome.
We were cooking jollof in Zimbabwe, and we don't have jollof in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And if people were praising me for cooking jollof, I was like, well, you might as well praise me for cooking our local peanut butter rice then.
Mm.
So that's how everything then started evolving. And I wanted to learn more and take Zimbabwean food outside more.
Awesome. And so I just want to clarify something for myself and listeners. So culinary school was in the US. Then after that,
Yes.
went back home to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And now, what was it? What made you go home after culinary school? Because you could have stayed in the US and started, doing things in the US, right? But home called you back home.
Yes. And again, I that part I feel like it comes in two parts. There was the spiritual side drawing me back home,
Mhm.
but also I wasn't ready to be in the US and flourish the way I needed to flourish.
Okay.
I would have not presented Zimbabwean food the way I do today or talk about Pan African cuisine in general had I stayed in the US.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will probably be making those trips right now, coming to Ghana, going back to Zimbabwe, trying to learn right at this moment if I had stayed. But I'm at a position now where I'm actually teaching people who are coming back, or
Nice.
people who don't even want to come back, people who are still in the US, people who are in Europe. They can literally just learn from me. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's why I had to go back
I
to
love that.
Zimbabwe if I look at it.
I love that. I think that is
Thank
so
you.
important. And like you said, at the time when you were growing up, the cuisine was being looked down upon. And now,
Right,
you're definitely putting it on the map, talking about
right.
what it is. And that is just as amazing as any other cuisine, right, in the world. Just because you don't
Absolutely.
know it doesn't mean that it's less than. So
Yes.
definitely
Yes.
not. So I want to definitely get into now some of the things that you are doing. Well, actually, before we do that, let's talk about the cuisine and the ingredients and the technique.
Right,
So
right.
let's give us a little Zimbabwean cuisine 101.
I like that. And as I always say to everyone, Zimbabwean cuisine is the most easiest, simplest cuisine out there. It doesn't take a lot of ingredients. There's not such a huge flavor profile. We value we are naturally agriculture inclined, so
Mhm,
we're farmers,
mhm,
and so a lot of what we eat is what we grow
mhm,
from our own backyards. Like every household has got a little garden where they grow their own kale and collards and onions and tomatoes. And so Zimbabwean cuisine is really earthy, natural, organic, um, flavorful, if you want to call it. Also, um, it's I think it's the epitome of what people are calling healthy eating at this present moment. Because the foods that we ran away from 40, 30 years ago
mhm,
is millet, is sorghum, is kale, all these superfoods that are creating big money for corporates is what we had in our background. And
mm,
so that's literally Zimbabwean food. If you look at the history, corn did not exist in Zimbabwe till the colonizers came.
okay.
We had millets, or all types of millets is
Mhm,
what our forefathers ate. Uh, but with colonialism and corporate wanting to make money out of corn,
mhm,
we ended up becoming a corn. Corn became the staple ingredient in most of our food. And if we dissect that and remove all of that, we realize that our our forefathers ate healthy. before us.
Mhm.
Now, we have people like me who have to fight off diabetes, and these were very uncommon diseases when we were, even when I was growing up.
Right.
Diabetes, cancer were unheard of. And now it's like, because of the influx of all these GMO, non-organic foods, this has happened. So the pride of Zimbabwe really is in its organic, natural, homegrown food.
Yeah.
The ingredients, we rear our own non-chemicalized, non-injectable um, cattle, goats, chicken. Um,
Wow.
to be honest with you, I really like, every household almost has a little chicken run where they have like their 50, 60 chickens running around. And that is the essence of what Zimbabwean food is.